if they stay the course and they go for the Bitcoin reserve, then we're talking about the U.S. government buying 1 million Bitcoin over the course of 5 years, 200,000 Bitcoin per year for 5 years, which would be 5% of the total supply, which actually would be it would be more than 5% of the liquid supply, because there are millions of coins likely have been lost. So this would be a very big deal. Now, what would happen would be that it would have to be passed that way, and then the government could go buy the Bitcoin after that. So what do you think would happen if the United States government passes this? They say they're going to buy 1 million Bitcoin. What do you think all the other governments and individuals in this world are going to do?
Lavish highlights the complexity of passing such a bill through the U.S. legislative system. The process involves committee reviews, revisions, and approvals, making it a lengthy and challenging endeavor. However, an alternative exists: leveraging the Exchange Stabilization Fund via executive order, which would allow Bitcoin to be added to the U.S. government's balance sheet in a more streamlined manner. While this approach may not fully reflect the Reserve Act's scope, it could serve as a stepping stone toward broader adoption. The passage of this legislation, Lavish notes, would create a cascading effect. Governments worldwide, institutional investors, and retail participants would likely scramble to accumulate Bitcoin, potentially driving up demand and prices. Such a move by the U.S. government could establish Bitcoin as a strategic asset, positioning it as a hedge against inflation and currency devaluation.
Please take a little time to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on post notifications for more videos like this. You can also check out our other videos on cryptocurrencies and the overall digital asset space, and drop your comments and observations in the comments section below. Everything you do helps with the YouTube algorithm and immensely contributes to the channel's growth. Thanks, and enjoy the video.
You know, what's important about Senator Lummis being involved in all of this and being put on that committee is that she's been spearheading this for over a year and a half now. And so she introduced the bill, the Bitcoin Reserve Act, and so it still needs a co-sponsor. You know, it's very early in its drafting because of that, and there could be changes to what the current kind of thought about it is. But with this new administration in office, there's a likelihood now that this gets done in due time. How quickly it happens, it's hard to say. There are a number of things that Trump could do, and there are a number of things that Congress could do. But it would have to go through a legislative gauntlet, and if it's going to happen the way that Cynthia Lummis, Senator Lummis, wants it to happen. And so that would mean it would have to go to committees, it would have to be revised, it would have to be approved, and so that it would take some time to do it that way. You know, there's another way that Trump can do it, and he could use something called the Exchange Stabilization Act to just through executive order and add Bitcoin to the balance sheet that way. Now, that would be something that would happen pretty quickly, and but it would be a smaller version of the Bitcoin reserve, right? So if they stay the course and they go for the Bitcoin reserve, then we're talking about the U.S. government buying 1 million Bitcoin over the course of 5 years, 200,000 Bitcoin per year for 5 years, which would be 5% of the total supply, which actually would be it would be more than 5% of the liquid supply, because there are millions of coins likely have been lost. So this would be a very big deal. Now, what would happen would be that it would have to be passed that way, and then the government could go buy the Bitcoin after that. So what do you think would happen if the United States government passes this? They say they're going to buy 1 million Bitcoin. Yeah. What do you think all the other governments and individuals in this world are going to do? Yeah. Obviously, they're going to go try to front run the government and buy it before them. There are a lot of things that are tailwinds. There's some developments that have happened that are tailwinds for Bitcoin, and these are some of them we've discussed. SAB 121 repeal, finally being repealed, that's a big deal. A Bitcoin Reserve Act, even bigger deal. But before that, there have been a few tailwinds that we haven't discussed. One of them is the new GAAP accounting. The new GAAP accounting, which was passed back in 2022, but it just went into effect this past December, was how you hold Bitcoin if you're a company, how you hold it on your balance sheet or in your treasury, and where you market at. Prior to this new GAAP accounting, you would have to hold this asset. If you bought Bitcoin and it went down, you had to hold it at the lower of your cost or the lowest price that it went to. So you could see is if you go back at Microsoft, at MicroStrategy's balance sheet, you can see how Michael Saylor had to hold this Bitcoin on his balance sheet for years because it went down to under 17,000. He had to hold it there. Anything that he bought that was at the lowest cost of lowest price that it went, and it was called an impaired asset. Now this new accounting is you can buy Bitcoin and hold it on your balance sheet at fair market value, which is normal for an asset. So that's a really big deal. And the only way you could get it off your balance sheet at an impaired value before was to sell it, and then you'd have to take the tax consequences of it. Even if it went all the way back above where you bought it, you still had to hold it at that impaired cost, so that impaired value. So now you can hold it at fair market value. And that will, I think, enable some companies that have kind of been on the fence and adding Bitcoin to their treasury or their balance sheet. Now they can do it without worrying about it being held as an impaired asset. And so that's a pretty big tailwind that just went into effect. So I think we're going to see some companies pop up here that are adding it to their balance sheet. They're adding it to their treasury just quietly, slowly. And, but they're not going to be standing back waiting for that new GAAP accounting anymore. That's already done. So that's a really big deal. And then another big deal is obviously those ETFs from last year. They were launched, and you and I have talked about this. BlackRock's ETF IBIT was the record-setting launch of an ETF ever, and so it gained over $50 billion in AUM in less than a year. It was a blowout offering that it's just continued to be. It's been a great. It's been a great avenue for institutional investors to have access to Bitcoin where they couldn't before. And now I'm seeing institutions, I watch IBIT, I watch FBTC, I watch Bitwise and some of these other ETFs that are the spot Bitcoin ETFs. I see them being adopted by institutions. Slowly but surely, they show up in those holdings now, and you can see them on Bloomberg. And so why is that? It's because it's made it so easy for them operationally where they couldn't do this before. They couldn't hold their keys. It was a fiduciary question about who is going to hold the keys, what the hierarchy is going to be. It was a personal responsibility, a fiduciary responsibility, and then where they were going to trade it, how are they going to trade it, who their trader was going to be, how they were going to settle it, where they were going to settle it, who was going to custody it. I mean, there were just a litany of problems that they had to overcome, which have all been taken care of in one fell swoop with this ETF, where they can just buy it and just like any other stock and hold it with their prime broker custodian. They know what the leverage is on it. They know what the margin is on it. It's very straightforward. So that's opened it up. That's a big avenue for it.
Lavish transitions to the importance of Bitcoin ETF in accelerating institutional adoption. He recounts the record-breaking success of the BlackRock ETF, which amassed over $450 billion in assets under management within a year of its launch. ETF provide institutions with a seamless way to gain Bitcoin exposure without navigating the complexities of private key management, custody, or trading infrastructure.
Back about a year and a half ago, we had, or a little over, about a year ago, it was repealed. So, but during Gensler's administration, the SEC, what they did was they kind of did an end zone run around Congress, and what they did is they had looked at the GAAP accounting, and they came up with they made a review of it and kind of a bulletin, right? So, and by doing that, they basically said they put all these risk parameters and warnings around holding crypto, holding Bitcoin on your balance sheet if you were a financial institution. And so it basically said you had to hold it as a liability as well. And so and it opened up banks and financial institutions to scrutiny if they did do that. So he kind of instead of going through the proper legislative measures, they did a review of it and they posted this bulletin, and then it basically put everybody on notice who was in the bank. It said, if you don't abide by this, then we may come and have more scrutiny on your company. And they don't even have to say this explicitly. It's understood that you kind of open yourself up to an audit if you trip up on anything on this. So then they gave a lot of pushback. There was a lot of public pushback about it. Congress came in. Both the House and the Senate had passed a repeal for SAB 121. I was actually in D.C. when this happened, and I ran into Senator Lummis on the street right after their vote, and they had repealed it. And it was really exciting. It was great. Okay, great. We can put that behind us. And then mere weeks later, so Biden comes in and he just turns around and vetoes it. He vetoes the repeal. And so it was back in order. And so now the Trump administration has said they're going to repeal SAB 121, and they're going to through executive order. They'll issue that executive order, and once and all, it'll be repealed. And so I think that's a really big deal. That another thing that has not been a real focus of Bitcoiners, but it's a big deal because this will enable banks to start operating in this space, offering products that are not currently offered for their customers. So you could buy Bitcoin or Ethereum or whatever right alongside your other holdings in your bank. You can hold it there, and they can soon start building and offering products around that, whether it's lending products, whether it's insurance products, or borrowing. There are going to be some things that they can do that they're currently not doing that'll be easy for everyday customers to use that they currently can't. And the banks they've just been too cautious to get into it because of that one kind of not ruling, but bulletin. Yeah, so what's really important about this administration is that the prior administration was antagonistic to our industry. I mean, they were fighting us in every corner. You had Choke Point 2.0, you had SAB 121 that was repealed, then that was vetoed. You had Senator Warren's anti-crypto army. It was just, there was a lot of pushback and noise and friction for any of us operating in this space, and it was a very difficult time. So now this administration is the exact opposite. They're embracing it. You may have heard Trump in Davos today said that he intends to make America the leader in the crypto space. And so that's incredibly important. Something you just mentioned, and it's really important, is that we're talking about getting regulation. We want regulation. We want to have an idea of exactly how we should be operating in the space. We're not asking to be unregulated. We're asking for clarity, and we're going to get that now, and we're going to get it without, forceful pushback and antagonistic behavior.
Lavish emphasizes that regulatory clarity is critical for the crypto industry's growth. Contrary to misconceptions that the industry seeks to evade regulation, Lavish argues that participants desire clear guidelines to operate confidently. With the current administration's focus on fostering innovation, the industry stands to benefit from a more collaborative regulatory environment. He also explores the broader implications of Bitcoin's increasing acceptance. As the U.S. and other governments move toward embracing Bitcoin, the asset's role as a global store of value becomes more evident. This shift could undermine the dominance of traditional reserve currencies, prompting a re-evaluation of monetary policies worldwide.